Hey guys, welcome back to Carsonian Beans. Today we're going to be doing NFL Week 14 power rankings. We're so close to the playoffs. I'm starting to get a bit hyped for it. I don't know if you guys are, but let me know. This is gonna be part one, so it's gonna be the bottom 16 teams. This is gonna be team number 32 to team number 17. If you're looking for part two, which will be the top 16 teams, so 16 to 1, the link to that should be popping up at the top of this, around in this area, sometime around now in this intro. If it's not, then it should be in my channel somewhere. You can find it. You can watch that instead, before or after this one. Just know it's there. So this is going to be starting off with team number 32, the worst team in the league. If you've been watching football at all, you already know it's the Jets. They actually had a pretty good game. This was one of the 2 weeks so far this season that I've actually considered putting them in 31st, but that last play there at the end, I like to think that it was them trying to tank, but the fact that they fired the defensive coordinator right after that, if you don't know what I'm talking about, they were up 28-24, and so there were 6 seconds left. So obviously, the Raiders had to throw a Hail Mary, and they blitzed. Instead of throwing a prevent defense, they blitzed, and I think even a 5-year-old would know to play a prevent defense in that situation, and it was really pathetic. So they fired the defensive coordinator for that, which tells me that maybe they weren't actually trying to tank. Maybe they thought that they could blitz and somehow stop it. I don't know. It was a terrible play call. They lost. They're still, they don't have a win. You're not going to be above any teams if you haven't won yet. In 31st, is going to be a hot take, but I have the Bengals down there just because of how atrocious their offense has been. This just is proving to us week by week how important Joe Burrow was to this offense. Only put up 7 points. Meanwhile, their defense just kind of their defense didn't play too badly. That's the reason I kept them above the Jets. In my opinion, I think the Bengals offense played way worse than the Jets offense this game. But their defense, in my opinion, it did hold that Dolphins offense to 19 points, which isn't very much, but it's better than what the Jets did, obviously. So they managed to stay above the Jets, but it was actually pretty close. They got eliminated from the playoffs today, and that is always going to be a bummer. In 30th, I have the Cowboys. They bump up one, mainly because the Bengals dropped down there. A rough loss to the Ravens. It would have been actually a closer game, but I think it was 34-17, but their kicker missed 3 field goals, which was kind of pathetic. Their defense, the Cowboys, it was actually pretty close. I think it was 17-10 going into the second half. So it was actually, they weren't playing too badly, but then they kind of collapsed. I think they let up, I think it was like 17-7 for the rest of the game. Their offense looked terrible. They got a couple breaks on special teams. They got they got one break. When I say that, it sounds like they made a couple field goals. They missed 3, but they had a nice kick return that went down inside the 30. So the Cowboys, they didn't play terribly. They played enough that I still think they're better than the Bengals and the Jets, but really that's not much to say at this point. The Jets are horrible and the Bengals are injury-ridden. Moving on to 29th, we have the Jaguars, who bump up one again, mainly because the Bengals are dropping down, and also because they haven't been looking too absolutely horrendous these past couple of weeks. They managed to take the Vikings, and they held them into overtime, and they did in the end lose, which is why they didn't jump up any. They mainly dropped down just because, again, the Bengals dropped down. There's a lot of movement has to do with the teams moving around them, but the Jaguars, I think they're in the bottom 5 no matter what. Playing terribly, they got eliminated from the playoffs a while back. I think the Cowboys actually, I think within the next week they could be eliminated from, no, I think next week. By week 15, they could be eliminated from the NFC East contention. It just shows how terrible this team is. I guess the NFC East isn't too bad, but we'll get to that in a minute. And 28th, we had the Broncos. They don't really move at all. Yeah, they played pretty well, but in the end, they did lose, and their offense did only score 16 points, which, again, no matter who you're playing against, I'm not going to, if their offense went out there and played horrendously, I'm not going to, give them points for scoring 16 just because they were going up against the Chiefs. They don't drop down, though, mainly because, one, how terrible the bottom 4 is looking right now, and also because their defense did hold Patrick Mahomes and that offense to 22 points. That had a lot to do with Patrick Mahomes making some rough decisions, in my opinion, and, that offense just, they couldn't get anything really done on the running game, in my opinion. The Broncos, I guess you could say that had to do with the Broncos defense, but I just couldn't, they had some good things on defense. They had some bad things on offense. I just left them where they are. They're 28th. It's still looking pretty bad. They lost. I don't think they're actually out of the playoff contention yet, so Broncos fans, who knows? Anyways, next up, this is a team that is actually eliminated from the playoffs. The Chargers, they were actually, I think the line was actually in their favor, but then they went in there and they lost 45-0. That was a terrible game by the Chargers offense and their defense. The Patriots have found their rhythm, and we'll talk about when we get to them, but they are just running the ball and playing really good defense, and we saw this here. I think Cam Newton had 60 passing yards that whole game, and the Chargers just could not stop their run, and their offense just couldn't get anything going. They turned into kind of like a Bengals-type team, where if they don't have Justin Herbert in there, I think this team would be 1-1. I don't know. I think they'd be way down there, possibly in the bottom 30. Not bottom 30, but this range, these bottom 3. But the Chargers, they dropped down 3 here. Just getting worse and worse. Next up, they're eliminated from the playoffs all the way. We got the Bears, who dropped down 4. They were looking good. I think it was 30-20 at one point in the fourth quarter. They were looking like they were going to win, and then they let up 14 points, and the Lions ended up winning at 34-30. The Bears, their offense didn't actually look too bad. It was mainly the defense that actually didn't show up very much. Obviously, you could say it only didn't show up in that last bit, but they did in the end allow 34 points to a Lions offense that it got shut out a few weeks ago. Last week, really couldn't get anything going. This Bears defense really did not play very well. Their offense kind of stepped it up, which is why they didn't drop down below. I think if their offense had played anything like how it did last week or the week before that, they would probably be in 28th or 27th in this range. But no, their offense kind of stepped it up a bit. They didn't look terrible on offense. Obviously, they scored 30 points, so they don't drop down too far. But still, they lost, and they are now 4th in the NFC North, and things are not going their way. In 25th, we have the Eagles, who bump up 2, even though they lost, because they finally put in, as you see over here, Jalen Hurts. He actually went in there. He didn't play too badly. They managed to score 13 points in there with Jalen Hurts. I know one of that was a kick return for a touchdown, but Jalen Hurts did manage to put out 7 points in a lot less time than Carson Wentz put up 3. And the Eagles, they definitely did look a lot better with Jalen Hurts in there. That being said, they don't bump up too far because they did lose by 14. Their defense did play horrendously. I don't think that they're going to be, in my opinion, I think that they're probably out of the question for even the NFC East at this point. I think that's really Washington's and the Giants division, as we'll get to that in a couple minutes. But the Eagles, they bump up 2, though. They would have bumped up more if they had won, if Jalen Hurts had got in there and led them to a magical comeback win, which he almost did. I think it was 23-16 at one point. I think it was 23-3. Then they scored 14 points, and it was a close game, but then, nope, they failed 30-16. But anyways, let's keep it going. This is going to be meh. These are the teams that are pretty meh. In 24th, you have the Lions, who bump up 1 nice win. However, their defense didn't play very well. It did allow that Bears offense that has been weak throughout this whole season, really has been their weak spot, to score 30 points on them. The Lions got a nice win. They look pretty good. I don't know what else I can say. Their offense definitely stepped it up. I kind of like the Bears. Their offense definitely stepped it up, but their defense kind of let them down. The thing is, though, the Lions' offense really stepped it up. Went from scoring no points to scoring 34 points. So the Lions, they bump up 1, but I just could not put them above the Texans. The Texans, they don't really move at all. They actually they lost, but they played better than I expected. I honestly expected this to be a blowout. I know a lot of people were saying this could be a really close game. It was a 26-20 divisional loss. So at this point, the Texans, they needed to win out. Now they're basically out of the playoffs. They could still technically make the playoffs, but at this point, it doesn't really matter. The Texans, really, we're starting to see Deshaun Watson is really the only bright spot on this offense. In my opinion, I actually think the way they were playing, I think that if Will Fuller had been in there, I think it would have been even a closer game, or possibly the Texans could have won. But in the end, they did lose, but they played really well, so I just kind of left them where they are. My opinion of them did kind of drop, though, but seeing as the teams, I can't put them below the Lions. I'm sorry, I just can't. In 22nd, we have the Falcons, who dropped down 5. A lot of people get mad at me because a lot of times I'll talk about how I don't want to overreact from one week. Well, last week they got a 37-point win over the Raiders, and I really overreacted. I put them up at 17, and I was thinking, oh yeah, this team's about to explode. Nope, they come into this week. Their offense plays horribly. Their defense also their defense had a pretty good game. It only allowed 21 points to that Saints offense that has been elite this whole season. season. Then again, their offense played horribly, and I just dropped them down to 22nd because that was a terrible game. They did manage to hang in there with this team, but I mean, Taysom Hill last week had its bad game, and then the Falcons defense kind of let them have a pretty good bounce back game this week. So it was some good and bad things, but the bad overweighed the good in my opinion. I ended up dropping them down by 22. I just overreacted from one week, and this is why I don't normally do that. Just outside the top 20, we had the 49ers who dropped down 10-point loss to the Bills. I thought after last week they had a chance in this one. They got a nice win against the Rams last week, 23-20, and I thought, maybe they could come into this game and shock everyone and maybe start rolling. They play Washington next week. I thought they could come out of this, 7-6 or something and be back in the playoff race. No, they lose. They're 5-7. It was kind of the opposite of what we saw last week. Last week we saw their running game take off. This week, Nick Mullins actually had a pretty good game, and the running game was actually kind of off. I did end up dropping them down 3 just because, they did take a pretty big loss that I thought, they played way worse than I thought they would have, especially on defense. Josh Allen had a really great game, and we'll get to that probably next video. I don't think they'll be in the bottom 16, the Bills. With the 49ers, just outside the top 20, it's not looking good for you guys. You go up against Washington, but obviously I haven't put Washington here, so I think they're better. In 20th, speaking of Washington, we have Washington. They move up 1, mainly because the teams above them. I would have moved them up farther, but there's some teams above them that I just can't move them above. That's one of the things. My opinion of them was, it bumped up quite a lot. I think Washington is a lot better than I thought they were last week, in my opinion. But, however, their spots they only move it to 1. They got a really, really, really good win against the Steelers. It was a pretty bad first half. It was 14-3 at halftime, but they managed to come back, and they won the second half 20-3. It was a 23-17 win. They knocked off the Steelers. It was really inspiring to watch this. I think everyone in the NFL was kind of rooting for Washington, as I'm pretty sure they root for anyone who's going against the Steelers any week. Washington finally got a nice win. They've had 2 really good weeks in a row, and now they're going up against the 49ers. If Washington can go in and blow out the 49ers, then they'll kind of cement that they are no longer, a bottom-of-the-barrel team, that they are actually a pretty respectable team in this league. Just know that if Washington goes up next week and they take a dump all over the 49ers, they might be in, part 2 next week, which would be kind of insane. But the Washington football team, they had a pretty good game. And yeah. Next up, Giants. I've been kind of rough on them all season. I had them down at 29th. I was really saying that I thought, they beat the Eagles, but I thought, hey, it's the Eagles, they're playing terribly. Then they went up and they barely beat the Bengals, and I kind of thought oh, here we go. They barely beat the Bengals, and now they're going to start losing a lot. No, they come in this week. Their defense was absolutely dominant. It held the Seahawks to only 15. No, it held the Seahawks to only 10 points. They got 2 points from a safety too, which is really the offense's fault. The offense didn't play too well, but seeing as they had Colt McCoy in there, and they are getting Danny Dimes back this week, or they should be. We don't actually know yet, but I'm pretty sure he is expected to play. So the Giants, they do bump up 10. They are at 19th now, and they are, in my opinion, they play the Cardinals this week, which I think, if they can go in there and they can beat the Cardinals, again, if Washington managed to take a double over the 49ers and the Giants managed to beat the Cardinals by any amount, I think we could see both of these teams up there. The NFC East is actually becoming kind of respectable, and it's not the 2 teams you would expect. The Giants are actually kind of taking control here, and Washington is close behind. In 18th, we have the Vikings who bump up to, it was against the Jaguars, but a win is still a win, and the Jaguars were actually playing pretty well. You can look at their record and say, oh, they must have played badly, but no. This didn't have a lot to do with the Vikings playing badly. The Jaguars went in there and played really, really well. The Vikings hung in there with them, and they managed to get a win, and a win is a win. The Vikings are now the 7th seed in the NFC. They are now in the playoff picture as of week 13. The Vikings, their offense went in there and played pretty well. They scored 27 points. Their defense, which again has been their weak spot all season long, kind of showed itself again, allowing Mike Glennon. Can you believe that? Mike Glennon, we're talking about him in 2020. But the Vikings, they did manage to get a win in overtime. It was a lot closer than a lot of Vikings fans would like it to be. But then again, I can't put the Vikings below the Giants or Washington. They do have a pretty tough game next week. We'll see what they can do. I have a feeling I will probably see them out of the playoff picture, but the fact that they did start off 1-5 and are now in week 13 in the playoff picture, it says a lot. This Vikings team, it does have a lot of potential, and I do think it will be good in the coming years. In 17, they have the Patriots. They bump up 2. The reason they don't bump up more is because, like I mentioned when I was talking about the Chargers, Cam Newton once again could not get anything done in the air. At least I think he had a couple rushing touchdowns, though he is a pretty good player, but like he's not a good quarterback. I mean, he obviously he's leading them to win games, but like he's not looking good doing it. However, I mean, they did good results. It was 45-0. You're not going to drop down from that. They do manage to bump up 2. I can't put them above the team that's above them just because the teams above them is pretty good. But that will about do it for this video. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording and start recording and instantly start recording part 2. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe. We post NFL content here every single day. If you're coming here from part 2, like if you watched all of part 2 and you went over back here to watch part 1, hi there. Thank you so much for doing that. If you're going to go watch part 2 right now, see you. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next one, which I will be recording right